Why the Rams were one of the big winners of the NFL offseason. That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button, and let us know, what is your favorite Rams offseason signing? Throw out some grades. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 sports, Bleacher Report, Dodgers Nation, SI. Now the Rams for Locked On. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He's entering his 9th season covering your Los Angeles Rams. The People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's show, we're looking back at the Rams offseason. We're throwing out some grades. Did the Rams address every need, and are they done yet? That's coming up next. But first, this episode of Locked On Rams brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right, Travis, so getting closer and closer to training camp. It feels like football is right around the corner. We're getting really close. So let's do a little recap of the offseason. And the Rams have gotten pretty much universal acclaim for their offseason. And we're going to break down each and every player, throw out some grades. But first, CBS has the Rams as the 6th best offseason. They had the Bears at 1, the Cardinals 2, Steelers 3, Texans 4, Eagles 5, and then the Rams come in 6. And I think when you look at the needs they needed to address, right, you needed to fill that massive gaping hole left by Aaron Donald. You went out there and you focused on defense in the NFL draft. You went out there and you drafted Jared Verse, you drafted Fisk, and then you solidify that offensive line. You brought back Kevin Dotson before he was even able to go to market. You bring in Jonah Jackson, Tre'Davious White, Darius Williams. I think they made a lot of big pickups that there's some high upside guys that we have to see how they fare coming off injury. Guys like Tre'Davious White. We have to see if Kevin Dotson, was he a one-year wonder, right? He had his best year in his last year. That's always a little bit of a concern when you enter free agency. But I think top to bottom, you didn't see the big flashy signings, but they made the right signings. And I do give this Rams offseason an A-.
Yeah, I think that you're spot on. And especially with what you mentioned there at the end, D-Mac, I think that this was a great offseason for the simple fact that it wasn't done with a super high dollar, big time splashy free agent thing to kind of mask the rest of the thing. This was done at kind of the grassroots level. This was done with players through the draft. This was done with players that maybe are not particularly expensive, but that have really significant upsides, guys like Tre'Davious White, who you mentioned, and they addressed the biggest need that they had during the offseason, which is Aaron Donald's decision to retire for now. Well, I'm always going to throw that in there. We'll see if he comes back at some point. But I think that's it. That when Aaron Donald left, the Rams became that team that went from, hey, they're going to be really good. They're going to score a ton of points. They've got Aaron Donald to shut things down defensively at least too. Hey, are they going to be able to stop people often enough to let that offense outscore the opposition? Can they win games, 35-31 on a regular basis? That's really hard to do in the NFL. I think the Rams will get into the 30s more often than they don't, but can you keep somebody out? And with Aaron Donald, the answer is almost always yes. Without him, I don't know. But it wasn't just take Aaron Donald out, drop someone else in. It was let's build a better defense from your front to your middle to your back end. And I think that that's what they did. And I agree with you. CBS having them 6, that feels about right to me. If I just would have told you, hey, listen, Aaron Donald's going to leave the team shortly after the end of the season. And oh, by the way, the Rams are going to have the 6th best offseason of all the NFL teams. That's a pretty good darn recovery.
Absolutely. And the offensive line is better. The secondary is better. There's no way to tell how these players are going to perform with Aaron Donald gone. But I do think that Aaron Donald has had a profound impact on the roster today. Not just the players, but also Les Snead. When he told Les Snead and Sean McVay, bringing guys that care, it's like the AD effect. And I think that has impacted Les Snead and the guys that they pursue, because they have proven now that they can scout, they can draft, they can develop. And I almost look at this as a 2-year grade with what they did last year in the draft, and the Kobe Turners and the Puka Nakuas, guys they picked up in the year they had last season. But I think for full vindication, for him to really get his flowers, we have to see how these guys perform, because there's a new show that's Inside the Draft that pointed out the behind-the-scenes stuff with Les Snead and Sean McVay, and they were trying to trade up to number 10 to get Byron Murphy the second. They were trying to trade up to get Brock Bowers, and every time they saw that 310 area code, we talked about maybe an 805, right? Not sure what area code Les Snead is, but every time they tried to make a deal, they said, nope, we're not doing it. So it remains to be seen. This season, will Jared Verse have a bigger impact than Byron Murphy? Will Jared Verse have a bigger impact than Brock Bowers? Let's wait and see, right?
Well, that's it, right? And who knows until you start to play. And you know me, and the everydayers will certainly understand this, that I get the hypocrisy of what I'm about to say. Okay, I understand what I'm about to do. The immediate reaction to drafts to me is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. You just don't know who's good. There's going to be somebody that's picked very high that's going to stink. There was somebody that's picked in the 2nd, 4th, 5th round that's going to be terrific. It happens every year. No one really knows for sure until we start to see him play. That being said, a lot of times the best deals that you make are the deals that just don't get done for whatever reason, whether you get cold feet at the last minute, whether the trade partner gets cold feet, whether there's never a deal to be made. I loved the idea of trying to go and get Brock Bowers. I think that that's the one piece on offense that the Rams have really never had under Sean McVay, which is an athletic playmaking tight end. I would have loved to have seen what happens. But what if Verse is fantastic? What if Fisk is even better than we hope he might be? And all of a sudden, those guys are never part of your organization. You got a tight end. Maybe he scores a few touchdowns, but you're giving up 35 points a game. Does it really matter all that much? These are the things that have to play out. I think that, if you're being optimistic, and I'm trying to be, the Rams needed a lot more on defense than they did on offense. As good as it would have been to have Bowers, and had they done it, I would have really liked it. This may be the proverbial, best deal you made is the one that you didn't make, and you got 2 high-end defensive players to bolster that side of the ball, because I think that's the vulnerable spot for this team.
I totally agree. I mean, you can always get taken away with the flashy weapon in a Brock Bowers. Sure. But when I look at Jared Verse, he's someone that was talked about as a potential top 10 pick. He has the requisite athleticism and tools and ability to be a multi-time All-Pro. That is his legitimate ceiling. And when you add the fact that he has these intangibles where he's this team leader, and I think the Rams need a team leader moving forward, I think he has the potential to be that guy. So I agree with you. I mean, it feels like he kind of fell into their lap at 19, but I think that if you told the Rams before the draft that they weren't going to trade up for Byron Murphy or Brock Bowers, and they stayed at 19 and ended up getting Jared Verse, they would absolutely take that, because, hey, some teams aren't going to trade down, right? These guys want these players as well. And like you said, the Rob Pelinka line, right? Can't buy a house is not for sale. And that was definitely the case in this situation. There was no move to be made. But I definitely think the Rams absolutely did a fantastic job this offseason, considering the retirement of Aaron Donald, considering their roster build at the moment. And we're going to take a deeper dive on some of these players. We're going to throw out grades for every single Rams offseason move. That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
All right, it is baseball season, full swing, right? The NBA is over. Hockey, we are down to the very last couple of games, maybe down to the last one. And the NFL, not far away, but right now it is baseball season, which means you want to go to a game. Who doesn't like sitting outside, having a drink, some peanuts, chatting with your buddies? But you got to have tickets. That's where Gametime comes in, right? The Gametime app is absolutely the best way to buy your Major League Baseball tickets and all of the things going on in your area, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, a play, whatever it is. You go to the Gametime app. You put that app on your phone. especially if you're a little bit like me and you tend to procrastinate those last-minute deals. Nobody is doing a better job with that than Gametime. So put that Gametime app on your phone, and you can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, everything that's in your neighborhood. You're going to love it. Dodgers and Angels, little freeway series coming up. You can go watch the Dodgers clobber them for a few nights, right? So when you're thinking about a game, a concert, a show, Gametime app. Put it on your phone, right? Take the guesswork out of buying your Major League Baseball tickets with Gametime. You download the app, you create an account, you use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, super easy. You create an account with Gametime. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download that Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams. The season is right around the corner, so if you're new to the pod, be sure to subscribe, become an everyday listener. That way you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. All right, Travis, here in our segment, we're going to break down some of these signings, and it's probably going to stretch this out into 2 episodes. But we got to start right at the top with the quarterback position. And that is Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's gone from being a Super Bowl starting quarterback to Matthew Stafford's backup. And he is going to miss the first 2 games of the season for PEDs. He is going to be suspended. But I think Jimmy Garoppolo, when you look at the backup quarterbacks that are available, he's someone that's played in a very similar offense to this. He doesn't have costly turnovers. He gets the ball out to his playmakers. This is a very respectable backup quarterback that will give this team a chance to win. If Jimmy Garoppolo's on the Rams last year, they don't lose to the Green Bay Packers.
I think that's it, right? This is a position that you hope you never, ever have to use. The backup quarterback in a perfect world is the guy that plays the last 4 minutes of the fourth quarter with a 5-touchdown lead. That's what the backup quarterback is for in a perfect world. It's rarely perfect. The Rams have, unfortunately, I don't even know if unfortunately is the right way to do it. The Rams have made the decision to go with a certain type of quarterback at that spot really since they came back from back to Los Angeles. This would be 9 years ago. They've had guys that are relatively inexperienced and relatively inexpensive, right? And I think it cost them a little bit. We saw it a couple of years ago when they went through that 5-win season when Matthew Stafford went down and they put John Wolford out there, they put Perkins out there, and it just wasn't NFL caliber play, right? You put Baker Mayfield out there on a team that, quite frankly, was not very good, that had all sorts of problems. They went 2-3. They were roughly a 500 football team because Baker Mayfield, whether you like him or not, I do, he's an NFL quarterback. And he was able to play at that level. Well, last season, you found yourself in a really similar situation, maybe for a slightly different reason. Stetson Bennett is unavailable. Now, all of a sudden, Rippon is your number 2 guy, not of NFL caliber. And it was glaring in that game against Green Bay. And now they realized that could have been the difference between them going to the playoffs or not. That one game can be the difference between having a season that is considered successful or a what the heck are we doing here? Jimmy Garoppolo clears that bar by 1,000,000%. Like you mentioned, D-Mac, this guy started for a Super Bowl team. It's not like he played in the Super Bowl in a Nick Foles situation where he just got hot at the right time, came in at the end of the line. He was a starting quarterback for a team that won enough games to get into the playoffs, won enough games to get into the Super Bowl, and he played reasonably well. I think that I'm more high on Garoppolo than a lot of people, mostly because when he played against the Rams, he seemed to go to a whole nother level. But I love the Jimmy Garoppolo signing, and I hope we never see him play. But if he does, I think he's going to do a really good job.
I agree with you. And you look at Matthew Stafford, 36 years old. If he gets banged up, misses a game or 2, right? I think just the first sign of any type of injury for Matthew Stafford, if you're winning a good amount of games and you're in a position to make the postseason, you could give him a day off because you have a Jimmy Garoppolo, right? You don't fear it and say, okay, this is an automatic loss with Jimmy Garoppolo. Yes, he did not have a great year last season. Threw for 1,205 yards, had 9 interceptions to 7 touchdowns at a 33.9 QBR. Well, first thing I want to say is finally a fully random drug test, right? Nobody was watching him and saying, you know what, we got to drug test that guy, right? But I do want to point out that he's a backup and not a starter. So for this, I definitely give it a B+. I give it a B+. I'm a hard grader.
I give it an A+. And here's why. It's the backup quarterback. How many teams have a Super Bowl starting quarterback that is your backup quarterback? If this was a free agent signing, I think it's more in the B, B-, maybe even C+. But as a backup, as a guy that maybe, has to play a game or two, I don't think you can ask for more. You're not going to get, I don't know, a player like, to take your pick, a Caleb Williams as your backup quarterback. You're not going to have the guy that is going to be, oh my God, that guy should be starting on every other team. Jimmy Garoppolo could start for 10 or 12 teams in this league. That he's your number 2, I don't think you can ask for more than that.
He definitely could. I give him a B+ just because, let's say Stafford had to miss the season. What is his ceiling, right? I mean, you can't really get Super Bowl winning ceiling, but still, I think that and the fact that he didn't have a lot of success against the Rams makes him a lesser grade.
In that situation, though, D-Mac, I think you're right. I don't disagree, but show me a team in the NFL, they lose their starting quarterback that's not dead in the water. Doesn't exist, and this team might be the least, you got a chance now, saying you got to run, you got to play defense, you got to make some field goals and all those things, but at least you have a pulse. Maybe the machine is breathing for you, but at least you have one at that point.
Yeah, no, I'll show you a team, the 1999 Rams with Kurt Warner. Next, we're going to talk about Kevin Dotson. So we were both on the re-sign Kevin Dotson train. We had it as our top priority for this team heading into the offseason. He ends up signing a 3-year, $48 million deal with the Rams. The beautiful thing was they got the deal done before he could even field any other offers. And when you look at some of the other deals that were made, Robert Hunt got $100 million. The Rams owned Jonah Jackson, got $51 million. So I do think it's a ton of value at $16 million a year. There's $32 million guaranteed in it, and he's going to be the 8th highest paid guard in the NFL. So he went from someone that wasn't in a starting role with the Steelers, gets traded to the Rams. He's known more for his pass blocking than his run blocking, and he flips the script on that. And for the Rams, he was a better run blocker than a pass blocker, and he ends up with an 88.8 run blocking grade. That was the highest among all guards. He finished with the second best overall grade at any player in the position, signs that big deal. I think it made a ton of sense, and it really speaks to the future of what the Rams are trying to accomplish with their vision and their emphasis on running the football with Kyron Williams and Blake Corum.
You're going to have to find some guys like that. And lucky feels like the wrong word, but it's the only one that kind of pops to mind where, hey, let's bring that guy in as a little bit of a depth piece. And the next thing you know, you're signing him to a free agent contract that has real money in it because he outperformed what your expectation was. To be a Super Bowl championship team, you're going to need one or two like that. Somebody that's just maybe a little bit better than even you thought, that performs at a level that's even a little bit above what maybe the most optimistic expectations might have been. And that was Dotson a year ago. He's a really good football player. I expect him to continue to be good. The interior of that Rams line is much better today than it was at this time last season because you know exactly what Avila is. You know exactly what Dotson is. And Jackson, like you mentioned, it had a little bit of an injury history here or there, but that is another very, very good offensive lineman in the NFL, assuming that he stays healthy. Those three guys in the middle, Rob Havenstein put that money in the bank. He's always exactly what you would expect. That leaves left tackle. Obviously, I think it's one of the one spots that maybe they didn't address to the need during the offseason, but the interior part of that offensive line is terrific.
Yeah, you mentioned Rob Havenstein and the left tackle position. Well, there weren't that many upgrades that were out there that they were going to pursue. There wasn't really one in the draft that they were going to get high enough, right? They weren't going to get high enough to get a Joe Alt or anything like that. But when you solidify the interior and you got Dotson, Jackson, you got Steve Avila, well, you take a little less pressure off of those guys. Not as much pressure on those guys to be perfect on every single snap. It is a little risky anytime it's a player who his best year was his last year, and he really only had one really elite-ish season in the NFL. I mean, with the Steelers, he had a PFF grade from 64.5 to 66.2. And you look at last season, that goes all up to 85.2. And that's even with his pass blocking grade going down to 68.3. So what I want to see from Kevin Dotson is get back to the Steelers pass blocking and maintain the run blocking that you've had with the Rams. And I think is a perfect fit. So yeah, absolutely totally agree. I give this one an A+. That's my A+ for Kevin Dotson. The value, the need, how great he was. He's nasty. And I think he's going to be a big part of this Rams team the next couple years. But coming up next, we're going to keep breaking down the Rams off season, throwing out grades. That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams. And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, just a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. So let's keep diving into this offseason breakdown. And next, we're going to stay on the interior of the offensive line. You mentioned him in our last segment. That is Jonah Jackson. The Rams, they pick him up for 3 years, $51 million. It came as a little bit of a surprise just because they just got that deal done with Kevin Dotson. And then I was like, oh, hey, wow, the Rams, they're not playing around, right? They are clearly prioritizing this offensive line. And Jackson, 24 pressures in 12 games last season. The market for guards, for offensive linemen, has jumped up through the roof in the last couple of seasons. I absolutely love this signing.
I do too. And I want to do the thing that you mentioned a minute ago, that we talk about the Dodgers a lot here on Locked On Rams. And one of the things that the Dodgers, I think, really value, maybe a little bit more than the rest of the teams in Major League Baseball, is the ability to do more than one thing, right? That if you can play multiple positions, the Dodgers probably are interested in what you do. There's the Chris Taylor, the Kike Hernandez. Ohtani is the ultimate example of this. Miguel Rojas, just guys that can Mookie, right? You know, there are just a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things. The reason that they could go and get Jonah Jackson is because Steve Avila can do a lot of things. It speaks to their draft philosophy that they were able to take Avila where they were, have him play the entire season at left guard and play it at a really high level. I mean, think about it. You're talking about a rookie offensive lineman who played every single snap of the entire season, and we never talked about him, which is the ultimate compliment for an offensive lineman, that you're not talking about him, oh, he got Stafford killed, or he missed this block, or he's picking up a bunch of penalties, or all that. We just like, yeah, he's really good. And after a handful of games, you're like, oh yeah, he's just a pro, and you keep moving. Well, the second year, you slide him a spot to his right, he becomes your center. And I don't think anybody's worried about his ability to do that. That versatility allows you to go sign Jackson, because you're not worried about, man, I don't know if he can do this. I don't know if we can slide him over. It was a very nice signing, obviously expensive, that they spent a lot of money on guards, which at first blush feels kind of weird. You know, you want to spend money on quarterbacks and wide receivers and things like that. But if those five guys up front are working, you're in a really good spot. I like it, but it's all set up on the fact that they drafted really well with Avila.
Yeah, 100%. It's that flexibility that they have with him. And also, look, they don't do this kind of stuff by accident. They wouldn't move him to center if they didn't think he was going to be a bigger asset at that position. They clearly have all the data, all the analysis, all the film study that tells you that moving him to center and getting two elite guards is the play for this team. So, yeah, absolutely. It's a big testament to Steve Avila, who was already great his rookie season, but maybe we haven't seen the best version of Steve Avila, because that's probably at center, because that's what the Rams are telling us with this move. But you're right. You signed two big guards like that, and you give them a lot of money. We talked about the Rams not having a player in the top 50 in the merchandise sales. That's definitely not going to help that, but it's going to help guys like me that want to win football games. We know it's done in the trenches.
Yeah, what it's going to help you do is make you a Kyren Williams fan. What it's going to help you do is become, a bigger Matthew Stafford fan. And wow, Puka did it again his second year. And Cooper Kupp looks great all over again. It's because those five big dudes up front are just grinding people to dust. Miami not buying their jerseys, but the guys whose jerseys you do want can't do it without those dudes.
That's 100% true. And also, too, the difference between Kevin Dotson and Jackson is, look, Jackson, he started each of the last 4 years for Detroit, right? I mean, this is just someone who he's only 27. It's really younger than you really think, just because it feels like every time you play the Lions, he was just a foundational, stalwart type player for that organization. So definitely give this one an A as well. Okay, it's not all A's across the board. I guarantee that. Watch tomorrow's show, right? I'm not a PE teacher throwing out grades here. Right? Everyone can say A, right? It's not like that, all right? But still, got to give the Rams a ton of credit. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.